Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Flint. I am Sandra Murphy, and I will be the worship associate for this, our Canvas kickoff and celebration of spring service. We refer to ourselves as a welcoming community because we value diversity. We welcome and support people who identify as LGBTQINA+. We welcome and support people of all income levels, educational backgrounds, spiritual journeys, and political beliefs. You are all welcomed here. If you are searching for a church that believes love, the quest for justice, and the use of reason are the most important things, then our congregation might be right for you. To learn more about UUCF, please contact one of our ministers, the Reverend Lynn and Jerry Kerr. Contact information can be found on our website, uuflint.org. We have some announcements this morning. March is Women's History Month. This is a special time to celebrate past victories in the fight for women's rights, which are human rights, and to continue our work to ensure women truly have equal rights. Show your support for Black Lives Matter and make a difference. Please join the members of Flint's Woodside Church on the courthouse lawn in downtown Flint every Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m. to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Woodside invited UCF to join them in this persistent, insistent witness. So let's add our presence to this effort. See your e-update for details or call Reverend Jerry Kerr. Join us for coffee hour after the service on Zoom. The ID can be found on our website, on our Facebook page, and in the e-update. Now, we will begin our service with a prelude by Jennifer Howard. Our chalice lighting words this morning. May this light fill us with gratitude as we remember the wondrous gifts that our community shares with all who are in need. May it remind us to hold precious one another and the world which provides us with sustenance and beauty. And now our covenant. Recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service, we gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to increase goodness and justice.
Good morning. It is said that ministers are here to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. It seems we are all sometimes afflicted, and we are all sometimes comfortable. May our time together this morning be a comfort and a confrontation. May we here find peace in times of tumult. May we here invite tumult into our lives. Come, let us worship together.
This morning, before our meditation, let us remember the 8 people who were killed in Atlanta. We are once again saddened by the many lives that are lost to hatred and bigotry. And may this service, dedicated to a faith that fights racism, bring some solace and justice. Our meditation this morning is a story by the renowned African-American essayist, poet, and author Langston Hughes. He entitled this piece, Salvation. I was saved from sin when I was going on 13, but not really saved. It happened like this. There was a big revival at my Auntie Reed's church, and she spoke of it for days ahead. My aunt told me that when you were saved, you saw a light, and you could see and hear and feel Jesus in your soul. I believed her. So every night for weeks, there was much preaching and singing and praying and shouting. Then, just before the revival ended, they held a special meeting for children to bring the young lambs to the fold. That night, I was escorted to the front row and placed on the mourners' bench with all the other young sinners who had not yet been brought to Jesus. So I sat there calmly in the hot, crowded church, waiting for Jesus to come to me. The preacher preached a wonderful, rhythmical sermon, all moans and shouts and lonely cries and dire pictures of hell. And then he said, "Won't you come? Won't you come to Jesus?" And he held out his arms to all us young sinners there on the mourner's bench. And the little girls cried. And some of them jumped up and went to Jesus right away. But most of us just sat there. A great many old people came and knelt around us and prayed. Old women with jet black faces and braided hair, and old men with work-gnarled hands. Still, I kept waiting to see Jesus. Finally, all the young people had gone to the altar and were saved. But one boy, and me. Wesley was his name, and Wesley and I were surrounded by sisters and deacons praying. It was very hot in the church and getting late now. Finally, Wesley said to me in a whisper, "God damn it, I'm tired of sitting here. Let's get up and be saved." So he got up, and he was saved. But I didn't go. I hadn't gone up because I hadn't seen the light or felt Jesus in my soul as my aunt had promised. I knew Wesley hadn't either, but he was sitting now proudly on the platform, swinging his knickerbockered legs and grinning down at me. So I decided I better lie too and say that Jesus had come and get up and be saved. So I got up, and suddenly the whole room broke into a sea of shouting. Waves of rejoicing swept the place, and women leaped in the air. That night, for the first time in my life but one, for I was a big boy, 12 years old, I cried in bed alone. Couldn't stop. I buried my head under the quilts, but my aunt heard me. She woke up and told my uncle I was crying because the Holy Ghost had come into my life and because I had seen Jesus. But I was really crying because I couldn't bear to tell her that I had lied, that I had deceived everybody in the church, and I hadn't seen Jesus, and that now I didn't believe there was a Jesus anymore, since he didn't come to help me.
"20 years ago, celebrated Harvard professor Robert Putnam made a seemingly simple observation. More and more people were going bowling for entertainment, but fewer and fewer were getting together to bowl in leagues. People were bowling alone, or more accurately, in smaller and smaller groups. In his book, Bowling Alone, Putnam showed that most people, not just bowlers, were increasingly disconnected from family, friends, society, all sorts of social structures. They were disconnected from them. His research involved 50,000 interviews, and he learned that people were not joining the PTA, the Elks, the Eagles, the Masons, bowling leagues, or churches. Pressures of time and money, mobility, sprawl, television, and finally the internet did it to us. He also found that societies that did not get together in large social groups had higher crime rates and less trust in people. He even showed how social bonds are the most powerful predictor of life satisfaction. Prominent political historians say that the bowling alone culture that Putnam described led to the election of Donald Trump. But time passes, and things sometimes progress and get better. In his recent book, The Upswing, Putnam shows that in the 1880s and 1890s, people also retreated from their civic organizations into their homes. They retreated because of income inequality, and class segregation were extreme because women could not vote. Factories were death traps. Animals were treated with cruelty beyond our imagination, and politicians were crooked beyond belief. But then, he shows that 20 years later, in 1901, frustrated progressive people came together and demanded change. They demanded women's rights, workers' rights, better treatment for the poor, and prosecution for those corrupt politicians. They wanted to make the world better in every way. They called for a more generous society, and they succeeded. Americans came out of their houses and started getting together again. They joined the PTA, charities and societies. They joined everything you can think of. Historians call it, appropriately enough, the progressive era. Everything runs in cycles, it seems. Putnam's data shows that Americans then went into our present slump starting in the 60s. It is now at a low point with people bowling alone and staying at home. But his data also shows progressives are again coming to the rescue. In fact, he thinks history may call the 2020s and the 2030s the new progressive era. He notes with certainty, history shows we can change history. Or, in Martin Luther King's words, we can bend history. He says, that's not happy talk. The data shows it's true. The evidence shows it's true.
It's a tug of war, what with one thing and another. It's a tug of war. We expected more, but with one thing and another, we were trying to outdo each other in the tug of war. In another world, we could stand on top of the mountain with our flag unfurled. In a time to come, we will be dancing to the beat played on a different drum. It's a tug of war, though I know I mustn't grumble. It's a tug of war, but I can't let go. If I do, you'll take a tumble, and the whole thing is gonna crumble. It's a tug of war. In years to come, we may discover with the enough for me. It's a tug of war.
The nuns at my parochial school said we'd be saved if we just confessed our sins to Father Tom every Thursday morning. They didn't say what would happen if we made the sins up. The counselors at the Mennonite camp said I would be saved if I went up front and threw all my cassette tapes filled with devil music into the trash can on the altar. They didn't tell me it was wrong to do it just because I was infatuated with one of those counselors. My godmother said I would be saved if I just got confirmed. She didn't tell me what was going to happen after the priest asked me to leave confirmation class and not come back. But when my dad visited me on a Thanksgiving weekend while I was in college and insisted we find a Unitarian Universalist Sunday service to attend, he didn't tell me I'd be saved, but it happened just the same. My dad had become a UU years before I did, and I must admit, I noticed a change in him. Besides becoming more liberal, dating a bisexual vegetarian, and going to protests, he was gentler and more open to talk to me. The sweetest thing was that after he had been a UU a while, every time that he talked to me on the phone, he would tell me that he loved me and that he was proud of me. That might not seem like much to you, but to me, it was like he was a whole different person. So the day that he demanded to see the yellow pages to look for a UU church, I was a bit hesitant about maybe getting brainwashed. I told him we didn't have any UU churches in the Twin Cities metro area. Turns out there was more than a dozen within driving distance. So we found the nearest one, and off we went. Much to my chagrin, after Dad went home that weekend, I kept going back to that church Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. Converted or brainwashed, or as I like to say, saved, I became a Unitarian Universalist. Do you remember what it was like when you first discovered Unitarian Universalism? It's like someone revealing that aliens really exist. You had no idea that there were people out there that thought like you did. Everything seems possible and wonderful. It reminded me of this radio sports commentator. His nickname was Mad Dog, and callers would call in and ask him how he was. And he'd answer with lines like, "The only way I'd feel better is if I was twins," or "Every day's a holiday, every meal a banquet." That's a little bit like what it was for me. But it didn't happen overnight. Being saved in a UU congregation isn't at all like the altar call that Langston Hughes described. It isn't a single moment or a statement or even a particular belief. Perhaps that's why people get a little nervous when we call Unitarian Universalism a faith. It conjures up images of thunderbolts from the sky or burning bushes in Charlton Heston. But our faith, which is true, is more reasonable, so it takes time. Becoming a UU is gradual. For most of us, it's a lifelong pursuit because our spirituality evolves. One UU minister explains the difference between a person with religion and one with a true faith is like the difference between jet boating and whitewater rafting. He says that most people are jet boaters and want power and speed. They're interested in defying and subduing the power of the water. But if the motor goes dead, they're helpless. In contrast, a white water rafter doesn't cover as much distance and is at the mercy of the current. They study the water and use its natural power to go in the direction of its flow. These people seldom worry about equipment failure, and they accept that nature is in charge. Well, as UUs go through life, we do ride the current, and we don't always know what's coming up around the bend. Somehow, though, I feel like we're up for it. Unitarian Universalism helps prepare us for the rapids and accompanies us during those lazy days when we're just floating and enjoying the scenery. But when I first attended a UU church, I was not only in the rapids, I was not even in the boat, and I was going under. I was in college. I was an honors student. I was working full-time, and I seemed to pretty much have everything in order. I was a master at smiling at the right time and showing enthusiasm, even when I didn't have any. After all, I'd been doing it for a very long time. But I couldn't find it in me to like myself or to be hopeful. I never told anyone. You wouldn't want them to think you're crazy or that you just can't be happy with what you have. I figured I'd either get over it or die trying. Then my dad dragged me to church. I was doubtful, but uplifted. That day there was a magnificent choir. And then, when I went back, after a couple of Sundays, I had joined them. I'd forgotten how much joy singing in a choir brought me. And that church had a very small building, and so we had 3 services every Sunday, and at times, I'd sing at all 3 because I liked it so much. And the choir, it was huge. So I knew they really didn't need another singer, but perhaps they knew that I needed them. I also wondered if maybe my dad knew that I needed the church. A couple in the choir befriended me and often invited me over for meals. After some time, I was asked to get trained as an AYS teacher. That's the precursor to Our Whole Lives. And then eventually, I helped create and lead the coming of age program there. So slowly, week after week, month after month, a darkness was lifted from me that had shrouded me for years. I finally would wake up and be glad that I was alive. I started to look forward to things, and I had hope. After listening to certain sermons, I started to like who I was. My life was actually transforming. And that's why I became a UU minister. That church was there for me when I needed it. It welcomed me and nurtured me. With each new responsibility, I felt more and more like I belonged. And in time, I began to feel needed by the church. After many years, I chose to change my life to save the faith that had saved me. There had to be other young adults like me that were lost and alone, that needed a UU community. So becoming a UU minister would be my part to help ensure that our faith would live on for generations to come. It's why I talk to strangers now about UUism. It's why I never shy away from asking people to support us. I truly feel that I can't risk that UUism will ever disappear. This congregation is 90 years old. 90 years of love, justice, and reason and faith. Imagine all the stories that are out there about people who might have been saved by a kind word, an uplifting sermon, or an inspiring choir. In 90 years, there must be people alive today that were saved by UUCF. Not to mention, right now, there are plenty of folks out there that I know need us. As you heard, we're at a point in history when once again too many people are bowling alone, as they say. People feel lost and are looking for a place to belong. They seek moral guidance for themselves and for their children. And many see the need for societal change and really don't know where to begin. But we do. We offer what people long for. We just need to let people know that we're here. And then we just need to be here. Letting people know that we're here is simple, and now is a perfect time to invite others to let us get to know us. With online services, no walking into an unfamiliar building and meeting strange people, visitors can watch us in the privacy of their own homes in their pajamas. You can help by going to our website and picking out a favorite service and sending a link to a friend. Or try inviting someone over to your home on a Sunday and have brunch for them. We never know who needs us and who just needs to be asked. Once people know that we're here, then we need to be there for them. And I mean, we need to put our best foot forward with great programming and staff, a beautiful building, and fantastic leadership. That takes your financial support and your talent. When you consider what you'll pledge to this congregation, I hope that you'll think about a life that needs to be saved tomorrow or in decades to come. And I'd also ask that you decide how much of your time this faith is worth to you. A vital and strong congregation needs all of its members to take on leadership at one time or another to remain a stable gathering place for everyone who needs it. I have no doubt that Unitarian Universalism will be available to all and always be available if we continue to support it in all of those ways. I am living proof that this is a true and saving faith. Join me in ensuring that it continues.
Thanks, Lynn.
Gather
I had a simple plan that day, 35 years ago. I was a member of the Huntsville, Ohio United Methodist Church, the leader of the youth group, and I had planned an overnight retreat for the kids. On a carefully chosen Friday, we would have a campfire, sing, talk, eat, have a lesson, and we would do it at a cabin in the woods. And I know for some of you that might sound like the beginning of another comedy horror movie. The cabin, owned by a member of the church, had a pond so the kids could swim in the afternoon, and it had a nice fire pit where we could gather at night around a campfire. It would be the perfect setting for me to tell them about the most ancient understanding of Jesus of Nazareth as being the great teacher who saved people with his words. I planned the lesson, bought the mosquito repellent. My fellow leaders gathered the wood for the fire. I was sure that this night could, in some small way, give these young folks a faith that might save them. And save them not from hell, but from ignorance and from some other person's bad religion, of which there are many. That may sound overly dramatic, but any faith leader who doesn't plan to save someone, at least a little bit, isn't much of a teacher or preacher. The afternoon swimming party went well. The kids had great fun, and everything was going smoothly. Then, as dusk approached, I lighted the fire and casually, naturally, meandered into a lesson. That's what you're supposed to do as a youth group leader. You don't just roast hot dogs and eat potato chips at a retreat. You have to put the young lambs onto your modern version of the mourner's bench. Not like, obviously, the one from this morning's reading from Langston Hughes. But nevertheless, our youth retreat was about giving young people some small piece of a saving faith. Of course, they were there for the fun of swimming and the sleepover and had no idea of what awaited them. Our service today is all about that thing called faith and why it is so important. For many people, the word faith is understandably distasteful. It is often used to describe unhealthful, irrational, even dangerous beliefs that do the exact opposite of saving people. Young Langston Hughes, like many people, did not find his aunt's faith to be true. Its demand for instantaneous salvation, seeing the light of Jesus on cue before the night got too late or too hot. That was not a true faith for Langston in 1913 and for many of us today. And now, 61% of Americans are in a group described by the Pew Research Center as ranging from being religiously relaxed to solidly secular. In other words, it's fair to say that 61% of Americans are not true believers. And the result? They're staying home on Sunday by the many millions. And then there are the Unitarian Universalists. The Pew Research data that I just quoted doesn't even describe UUs. In their chart, we are not considered a religion because it does not have a category for atheists, agnostic, pagans, unorthodox Christians who practice all of those things religiously. My friends, the Pew Research confirms what we have always thought about ourselves. We defy description. I think most of us are fine with that. We believe our uncommon, hard to describe religion can play an important role in saving America from its many problems. Many problems like racism, xenophobia, and white supremacy. Problems that can't be solved by clinging to the old common ways that have failed so spectacularly in the last few years. On that night, at the cabin in the woods, I wasn't trying to turn the Methodist kids into Unitarian Universalists. Not at all. I had a short lesson on Jesus, the champion of peace, who saved people with his words. As chance, or perhaps destiny would have it, I was never able to even start the lesson. The minister's daughter was part of our group, and she invited her boyfriend to our retreat. That was good. And her boyfriend attended a fundamentalist church, and he brought the church's youth group leader with him. That was not so good. Our meeting was crashed, invaded, Zoom bombed before there even was a Zoom by a super youth group leader. He was not the axe murderer usually associated with the cabin in the woods, but to me, it was almost as bad. He proceeded to kill my carefully made lesson by telling the youth, if you haven't had a dramatic conversion experience, you probably aren't saved. You may remember the story in the New Testament about Saul. He was blinded by a brilliant light when the risen Jesus saved him from his sins, and then Saul became Paul the Apostle. That is what super youth group leader demanded of the young lambs. I'm guessing they must have felt a bit like 12-year-old Langston Hughes when he was told he must see the light to get saved, but then he didn't see it. Our surprise guest asked me to recite my own conversion experience. And I remember so well, I said, I believe getting saved happens over a period of time. It can be different for different people. It can be slow. And it was obviously a complicated answer. And he interrupted me in mid-sentence, scoffing at my ideas, putting an axe to my faith. The lambs were not entertained by this dueling youth group leaders. Many of them retreated to the safety of the cabin to get away from it. A tug of war over who has the true faith is very poor entertainment on a Friday night. I didn't blame them for running away. They were safe in the cabin, safe from a theology I believe to be the opposite of saving. When Lynn and I interviewed here to become ministers, we were given the notes from meetings in which members of the congregation described what they wanted from their next minister. One of you, said, we want heartfelt sermons. Heartfelt sermons. That stuck with me because I know for a fact that heartfelt is the main ingredient in a sermon that serves the congregation. A message that comes from the center of the speaker, their heart, is one that has a chance of doing some kind of good. All of the other blah, blah, blah ingredients in a sermon is just the speaker knocking around trying to find the heartfelt part of their sermon. Facts and figures can be interesting, but it is heartfelt words that truly touch someone, save someone in some small or even big way. I'm happy to say that our UU faith in love, reason, and justice makes it easy to speak heartfelt messages against hatred, irrationality, and injustice, which are the exact opposites of what we believe in. Our faith makes it easy to make heartfelt requests of our members to support this church. We are fortunate in so many ways to have a seemingly complicated faith that is in fact simply about the power of love and compassion. People of other faiths spend a lot of time and energy deciding what parts of their faith to believe and support. They have to consider things like, is the Bible true from start to finish, as some claim? Can I believe some parts of it and not others? Can I still be a good Catholic if I think the Pope is wrong to say that same-sex marriage is unholy? How can you call them true believers when they don't know what to believe anymore? You may have never thought of it this way, but if you are looking for a gathering of some true believers on a Sunday morning, you don't have to go to a fundamentalist church. Just visit your local UU congregation. My theological rival that night by the campfire was a true believer, and I commend him for that. Of course, I feel strongly that many of his beliefs were irrational, unhelpful, and the opposite of salvation. My faith, our faith, marches to the beat of a different drum than that of the super youth group leader, whose campfire I never invaded. That long ago debate on salvation at the cabin in the woods had a surreal, dreamlike feeling to it. It all happened by the flickering red light of a campfire, and I never even got a good look at the other true believer. He was really just the faceless force that still demands everyone toe the line and maintain the old ways, even if they're not true. Even if they lead to hatred and division. The battle continues, not just among religious faiths, but everywhere people fight to be saved. And now, there are signs our nation is on an upswing. The progressive people of our country are aghast at the hatred, ignorance, and outright stupidity of the recent past. They are coming out and coming together to vote, to protest, and they want everything to be better. Our congregation will be part of that coming out. It has been here for 90 years proclaiming its saving message, and we need to make sure it stays here. As Lynn and Sandra mentioned, this is the beginning of our canvas time. And I hope the members of this congregation will support this church with their pledges. With your support, we can remain a voice for the faith of love, reason, and justice. Dan's song this morning describes our goal. In another world, we could stand on top of the mountain with our flag unfurled. In a time to come, we will be dancing to the beat played on a different drum. Thank you.
So our time for generosity today is going to look a little different because this is where I get to do, as the chair of the canvas, the pitch. I've never done this before. And so I took it very seriously as an opportunity for me to think about all of what UU churches have meant to me, and as well, how did I learn about being generous? I grew up in a generous family, and my father, a small businessman, was a member of the Lions Club. I remember many fundraising picnics and bubblegum machines that all sent proceeds to the Leader Dog for the Blind in Rochester, Michigan. And my mother would walk up and down our suburban street with a little cardboard folder and collect dimes for the Mother's March of Dimes. I thought that little folder, when she came back and it was so heavy, was just the coolest thing. She also, as a member of the Mary Martha Guild at our Lutheran church, would from time to time go to the church with all these other women, and they would sew cancer pads, which we don't do that anymore, thank God. But I remember that it was a solemn ritual to do this, an act of healing. And then every Sunday, my parents gave my brothers and I a quarter to put into the collection plate. We never talked about generosity. We never talked about tithing. We lived it, and they gave us the examples. So as I grew up, I went further and further away from the Lutheran Church because I particularly did not like how they treated women. And in my late 20s, when I was a graduate student at Oakland University, a friend of mine invited me to go to the Birmingham Unitarian Universalist Church for a woman's retreat. If it wasn't that I loved Lucy dearly, I don't think I would have went, but I trusted her. And that weekend shocked and amazed me and gave me great excitement about here was a faith that valued women, that gave them a place to speak and to be themselves. I loved it. I went back and forth a few times to the Birmingham UU Church, but because I was finishing my program, I didn't join. Instead, I moved to Lansing, got my first real job and my first real paycheck, and I joined the East Lansing UU Church. I went to the Building Your Own Theology class, I went to the Getting to Know UU, and then I signed the book. And not long after I signed the book, I was asked to make a pledge. Never in my life had I been asked to make a pledge. Now, I've been living on my own, I've been paying my bills, I knew what it meant to pay the bills. And now as a nonprofit manager, I also knew what it meant to raise money to ensure that programs would be in our community. So I made a pledge. And then I did that for 8 years, got married in the memorial garden of that church, and moved to Detroit with my husband. I found Northwest UU Church in Southfield. I walked in 7 months pregnant and fell in love. I signed the membership book immediately because of the people that were there and that I knew our child was going to have a wonderful church experience. And again, I was asked to make a pledge. So now I had to stop and think about my pledge was going to be based on not a full-time salary, but part-time when I had this baby. But I thought I could do it. So I made the pledge. And I also volunteered a heck of a lot of time. I signed up for coffee hour. I was teaching RE. I served on the search committee for the minister that we brought to Northwest. Just did a whole lot of things, and I loved every single bit of it. And then life presented me with what I call a defining moment. My daughter was 9, and I decided I needed to file for divorce. I had to re-examine everything, all of my resources, all of my expenses, and it was pretty clear to me that that pledge that I had made was looking more and more problematic. And I worried about that. Would I be judged if I didn't fulfill this promise? I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. It was very complicated. Money always is. And what could I do? So I wrote a note to the treasurer, put it in the mail. And the day that she got it, she called me, and what she said was, "How are you? And what can we do to help?" There was no judgment, no talk about a pledge. Nothing was ever said about that. I was offered the love and the support that my daughter and I needed. And as you can see, this is an emotional defining moment for me. It proved to be significant because 3 weeks after that, we had to leave our home. And we were housed for 6 weeks in the home of one of the members of the congregation while I found us a house and got a full-time job. So, why do I pledge? I used to pledge because I knew it paid the bills. I get that. I used to pledge because the RE program and all the family social gatherings were wonderful for me and my child. And my hope is that every family that walks through our doors will have that same experience. But now I pledge because I'm 70, I'm retired, I'm comfortable, and my kid is launched. And I want to make sure that this place is available for anybody who has a defining moment. Because we will only say, "How are you? And what can we do to help?" Today we kick off our annual canvas, but it's also a time to say thank you. We thank you for your past financial support. Whatever motivates you to give, we thank you. We thank you for your gifts of time and talent. All of what you do is needed here and deeply appreciated. We are grateful for our board, for their leadership in pledging. 100% of them have renewed their pledges, and many have increased what they're going to give. Thank you. Our hope is that all of those who have pledged in the past will do it again. And we ask that you consider a 10% increase this year. Give as you are able, give until it feels good. So how do we do a canvas in this time of COVID? We don't have house parties, we're not going to have a big luncheon, and I miss that. But instead, we are hosting a Spring Fest Canvas drive-through here in our parking lot from 1:30 to 2:30, Sunday, March 21st. Come and drive through 4 stations that are going to be spread out over the parking lot, clearly visible to you all, and staffed by friendly faces, people that you may not have seen for quite some time. Goodies will be distributed along with pledge forms for those who are pledging. If you are unable to drive through and are interested in pledging, please contact me or the ministers. If you are a pledging member and unable to attend, we will drop your pledge packet in the mail. We want everyone to join us. This is a time for us to celebrate our community and reconnect with our friends.
Thank you, Sandra. In this community, we give and we receive. May we go forth now to share the bounty of our love.
And now let us extinguish our chalice We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.